and action. Here we go. So this post is called I'll Never Be the Same Again, Again. Hey, Marge. So about 5 days ago, I was in Bolinas, California, and I was walking in the woods in the dark. I was there for a retreat. It was a healing retreat slash consciousness retreat that was about 20 years in the making. About 20 years ago, somewhere in there, I met this guy. Hey, Ed. I met this guy and we had an immediate knowing of each other. And he's a tall, George Washington looking white dude. Hey, Lewis, you'll see this later. I don't know if he's George Washington looking, but if you had an actor that played a George Washington back in the day, he would have pulled it off. He had that founding fathers vibe, but without the slaves. He was a conscious dude working in DEI back when DEI was not popular. He had started doing films and things in that range after having a near-death experience that awakened him to the fundamental oneness of humanity. And if you look up Lewis Brown Griggs on Google or something, you'll see a TEDx talk of him talking about his near-death experiences and things like that. So all these years ago, I met Lewis, never realizing that 15 to 20 years, however many years later, we were going to both be sitting in Bolinas, California, with a group of folks trying to understand how to lead from consciousness. And yet here we were. And that morning, as I was walking around in the woods in the dark and came upon a labyrinth that was there and decided I was going to walk the labyrinth, I felt this feeling of I was always going to end up here, that somehow my life was going to always organize itself, that I was going to be there during that week, meeting these people besides Lewis for the first time and discussing what it means to lead from consciousness. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. I knew that everything was leading up to that moment for some reason. And I knew that I was never going to be the same again. Because so many times in my life, I've had these experiences that changed me in different ways, fundamentally changed me. Some I initiated, most I didn't. Most of the time, the initiation began with feeling like something was getting ripped away from me, whether it was a relationship, a child, which I don't get into much, but 25 years ago, I had an experience of child loss. Different things that have come into my life and said, you're not going to be the person you used to be. You're going to be someone else. And you can either resist it, which I would not recommend, says the universe, or you can go along with it. Typically, I resist it first because that's how I like to roll. But eventually I stop. And recently I told myself that I'm not going to do that anymore. That when an opportunity to shift shows up and I know what it is, I'm just going to walk through that door. And so last week I walked through that door and spent 5 days with some people who have lived their own journeys. And we all came to this moment where we were thinking about the world that is and started thinking about the world that can be. What does it mean to live consciously? What does it mean to lead consciously? What does it mean to love consciously? And after spending time with those folks, I know that I can't go back to whatever was before last week. Before last week, I was frustrated, largely with people who say one thing and do another thing without apology. I like to call them hypocrites. And I was letting them get to me because I wanted them to be better than it seemed that they were showing up. I was frustrated because I have heard people take teachings that are intended for love and use them for love's opposite, if there's such a thing. I've seen a lot of denial and a lot of our institutions being gross, which is the best word I could come up with. But after hanging out with folks who are committed to consciousness, I feel this sense of responsibility to continuously lead from that place. And I've always, you know, tried my best to, but I've also tried to avoid being a leader. I don't like the idea of being a leader, honestly. I like the idea of staying in my integrity. I like the idea of learning and growing, repenting in the positive sense of the word, which is to turn around and go in a different direction if I realize I'm going in the wrong direction. Those are all part and parcel of living a life that of paying attention. And so I paid a lot of attention, but I never really wanted to look at myself as a leader. And yet I would encourage other people who thought of themselves as leaders. So one of the things that I'm changing about myself or accepting the change is that I'm finally going to accept that for better or worse, I have some kind of leadership role. And I guess we all do in some way, but some kind of leadership role in my community. And so I'm going to try to be more intentional about that because for the most part, I do what I think is right, but I don't think about it in terms of whether it's leadership or not leadership. I just get terrible feelings when I don't do what I think is right. But now I'm going to try to be more intentional about that and see how that shifts me. I'm also going to withdraw my energy from people who have made a commitment to hypocrisy. I can't tell them what to do. They're free. They want to be hypocrites. That's up to them. But I don't have to give them my energy. So I'm going to withdraw my energy from some people who the only reason I push is because I wanted or hoped or thought that they could do different or be different or do better or be better. And maybe they can, but it's not my responsibility. My responsibility is first to my own consciousness and keeping myself clear as I can mentally. And then secondly, to living in a way that if other folks want to make that choice, then I can be some support. Also, you know, I've discovered that many people are just going to do what they're going to do. And so I'm not going to try to stop them. What I am going to do is try to operate from that Buckminster Fuller paradigm that admits that you can't fight the existing system. You can only create something better that makes the whole system obsolete. And so I want to work with people who want to create something better that can make these old systems obsolete and hopefully live and operate from an invitational presence so that people can locate themselves in that. And so I'm going to be doing that, which is going to mean changing some of my writing style or not posting some things that I sometimes post when I'm trying to operate from frustration as well as consciousness. I'm trying to eliminate some of that. So I may not be posting some things that in the past I would have posted. And I'm also going to share some things that I haven't been sharing. There's things about my spiritual path and my spiritual journey, encounters I've had, experiences that I've had that don't comfortably fit into the Judeo-Christian paradigm as it's understood. It does in the mystical sense of it, but I don't always share that, largely because of my fundamentalist Christian background. And my grandmother used to always say, don't let your good be evil spoken of, meaning even if you're doing good, don't let people think that your good is evil. But that's none of my business what people think. So I'm going to be sharing some things that may seem like they're outside of the Christian tradition, but they are just not things that are commonly shared. But if you study any of the mystics or the early church folks, it's very common in those traditions. And some of those things will seem more esoteric. They may even seem more new agey or whatever the case may be. They're not, but I'll be sharing more things like that. And I will be getting into probably some more vulnerabilities and intimacies that I haven't shared in the past, simply because I don't like sharing things that usually include another person whose permission I might not have to share their part of the story. So I struggle with that. But I'm now going to share more of those things just because I think that they may be invitational to some people who are on their journey trying to make sense out of all of this nonsense. So things like, I'm not going to get into it right now because I'm working on it. But as I mentioned about the child loss experience that I had 25 years ago that I don't really talk a lot about, I may start talking about things like that. Some things that are kind of more painful, but I'm not sharing them for just to share pain, but to share possibility, because in that pain, whichever pain we come across, there's always possibilities. And so I want to be more transparent and vulnerable in those spaces, just because I think it might serve some folks. So stay tuned for that. And also, I wrote a book some years ago that I decided not to share. Then I decided to rewrite it recently, and then again hesitated to share for some different reasons. And it's called Words That Have Never Been Spoken. And for those of you who are paid subscribers, I'm going to start sharing that book as I continue to rewrite it. So I have about 2 or 3 chapters of the rewritten version that I already have written. I'm going to edit those and start posting them. And then I will ideally finish the book on Substack and I will appreciate some feedback from paid subscribers if they tend and if they watch it, or excuse me, read it. And so I'll be doing that. I'll be sharing some things in that direction. And we'll see what else comes out of it. But one of the things I do to activate, my commitments is I do publicly kind of put my commitments out there so that it forces me to live into those commitments. And after this experience over the past, week with these folks, who are intentionally being, conscious leaders, I want to fully live into that commitment. So that means I need to do things to activate it. And so activating it is posting this, some of the things that I'll be writing, and letting some people go. Definitely going to I've already been eliminating some people from my life, because I know that they make commitments um, to, to nothing probably. But I've been having to let some folks go, and I'm going to continue um, to cut people out of my life, even if they're family. I'm just going to cut them out because um, even in the tradition that I practiced for a bunch of years, Jesus even said, "Cut those suckers off." That wasn't the way he wrote it, but sometimes you have to. I'm not saying everyone does, but for the person that I'm choosing to be, I will have to. Um, Cut off some people, eliminate some people from my life, because I know that if I have an entanglement with them, my relational commitment with them will keep me from my commitment to consciousness. And I choose consciousness over them, largely because if I choose consciousness, I can have a relationship with them on some other level that may create possibilities for both of us in the future. However, if I choose them, I can get mired in ignorance and intellectual laziness and spiritual laziness, and it doesn't do anything for me or them. Like Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. People say wrestle with dogs, you get fleas. All those things that sound rude, but they're very true, and people said them for a reason. And so I will just be deleting people. And it sounds kind of cold, probably, but I have to for the person that I want to be. And do suggest that other people cut people out of our lives, because sometimes people need relational consequences. Because if we enable them by continuing to engage them, then they will just stay in that junk. And maybe if you stay out of their life, they may go and be worse with someone else, but that's their choice. And I respect people's choices. So for I know that there's no one on Substack that I'm connected to that would fall under that category of people I'm deleting from my life, because if you spend time being up here, then you're not one of those people. But for the rest of the folks, it just is what it is. And I don't mean it in a negative way, but I just don't really want to spend time with you anymore. Anyway, besides that, I'm also going to be working at a spiritual center soon, which is also going to be interesting because that unfolded in a mysterious way as well. So I'm very curious to see what's emerging from that. And for those of you who hang out here, you'll start to see more of that and get a sense of what that looks like in real time, because I don't even know. So I appreciate everyone who spends time here on my Substack, people that I've met in person, people that I'm only meeting through this medium. I appreciate all of you. And If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them to me. I'm going to continue to work on myself and continue to try to create opportunities for other people who are making the choice to live more consciously, and also to kind of help us, those of us who, you know, we want to make shifts, but we're afraid of what we're going to lose. As a person who's lost a lot in my life, I can promise you that whatever you think you've lost, if you let it go, something more will come in, and what comes in will serve you better than whatever you were holding on to. That's hard to see sometimes because they have that whole saying, the devil you know. But I mean, really, do you want to hold on to a devil you know? Let go of the devil, and open your heart and your mind and your body and your experiences to some mystery. Because I think that at the end of the day, uh, the when the mystery's solved, it all comes down to love. So I appreciate you all. Thank you. And let's see what's next. Peace.